There is something you have been pretending is a question. It is not a question. You already know the answer. You have known it for longer than you are comfortable admitting, and the reason you keep framing it as a question, the reason you keep returning to it, turning it over, asking people about it, watching videos about it, reading books that circle it without landing, is not because you don't understand it. It is because understanding it would require you to stop pretending the two things you want are compatible: safety or power. Not safety and power. Not safety on the path to power. Not a balanced, sustainable, optimized approach that gives you the transformation you claim to want while leaving your comfort structure intact. Safety or power. The quantum field does not negotiate. Consciousness does not get to superpose two collapsed states. The observer cannot stand in two positions simultaneously and expect reality to resolve into a single coherent form. Today you look at this directly, not because it is comfortable, because you have been avoiding it long enough that the avoidance itself has become the thing running your life. Here's what no one tells you about observation. The moment you genuinely look at the thing you have been avoiding, it cannot remain what it was. Not because looking at it changes it the way your hands change clay, but because what you were calling the thing was never the thing itself. It was the shape your avoidance gave it. It was the shadow your refusal to look cast across the wall. The moment you turn and face it directly, the shadow disappears, and what you find is never as monstrous as the shadow suggested. But it is always more demanding because the shadow asks nothing of you. The truth asks everything. Watch what happens in your body right now when you hear this. Something tightened, or something released, or both happened at once. A tightening in the chest and a loosening somewhere deeper, as if part of you has been waiting for someone to say this out loud. That response, that somatic recognition before your mind could form a defense, that is not anxiety. That is your nervous system recognizing a frequency it has encountered before, the frequency of a choice that has been waiting to be made. Sit with that for a moment. Don't rush past what you just felt, because this is where we begin. Not with the concept, not with the science, not with the story, with the recognition that you already know what this is about. You already know which door we are walking toward. And the fact that you are still here, still watching, still listening, that is not passive consumption. That is the first act of the observer. You chose to look. That choice has already begun to collapse the field. Let's go deeper into what you are actually seeing. For most of your life, you have been operating under an assumption so fundamental that you have never examined it as an assumption. You have treated it as the air itself, invisible, unquestionable, simply the medium through which everything else moves. The assumption is this: that you can want two things simultaneously, and that wanting them simultaneously is the same as choosing between them. You want to grow, you want to be safe, you want to expand, you want to be certain, you want to become something you have not yet been. You want to remain recognizable to yourself and to the people around you. You want the power that comes from full commitment. You want the security that comes from keeping your exit routes open. And you have been treating this as a tension to manage, a balance to find, a middle path to walk. You have been reading books about sustainable excellence. You have been optimizing your morning routine. You have been finding the approach that lets you pursue greatness without the cost that greatness has always required. You have been looking for the exception, the evidence that you are the one person for whom the fundamental terms of transformation do not apply. Here's what I'm going to show you today. That search, that relentless, sophisticated, endlessly resourceful search for the exception is not a failure of strategy. It is not a lack of information. It is the most precise, most efficient, most metabolically expensive thing your nervous system can do to keep you from having to make the actual choice. The search for the exception is the avoidance mechanism at its most elegant, and the moment you see it for what it is, you cannot unsee it. If what you're seeing right now is landing for you, like the video and subscribe to Quantum Watcher. This is the work we do here, and there is more of it waiting for you. This is where quantum mechanics enters, not as a metaphor, not as inspiration, as the actual structural reality of what is happening when consciousness attempts to maintain two collapsed states at once. In quantum physics, there is a principle that has been confirmed through decades of experimentation, a principle so strange and so precise that physicists spent years arguing about its implications before accepting that the universe was simply telling them something they did not want to hear. The principle is this: a quantum system exists in a superposition of all possible states simultaneously until it is observed. The moment observation occurs, the wave function collapses. The system resolves into a single definite state. Not because the observer did anything to it, not because the observer interfered with it mechanically, but because observation itself, the act of a conscious system directing attention at a quantum system, is the event that forces reality to choose. Before observation, everything is possible. After observation, one thing is real. And here is what the physics reveals, that most people never sit with long enough to feel its full weight. The collapse is irreversible. Once the wave function has collapsed, the superposition is gone. You cannot go back to the state of all possibilities once you have forced reality to choose. The observation is permanent. The collapse is final. Now watch how this applies to you. Right now, in this moment, your consciousness exists in a superposition. Safety and power both exist as real possibilities in your probability field. Both are genuinely available to you. Both have real quantum weight. The field is open. The wave function has not collapsed. And as long as you refuse to observe, as long as you refuse to look directly at the choice and make it, you get to experience the subjective sensation of having both. This is not a small thing. The superposition state feels like possibility. It feels like freedom. It feels like you are keeping your options open, which your nervous system experiences as safety. You have not committed to the climb, so you have not failed at the climb. You have not given up the comfort, so you have not lost the comfort. You exist in the quantum space between both states, and from the inside, this feels like wisdom, like patience, like not being reckless. But look closer. The superposition state is not a state of having both. It is a state of having neither. Because power, real power, the kind that reorganizes reality around your clarity, does not exist in the probability field. It only exists in the collapsed state. It only exists after the observation has been made, after the choice has been forced, after the wave function has resolved into a single definite reality. The sensation of having both is the sensation of having neither, experienced from a comfortable distance. That is not belief. That is quantum mechanics, and your nervous system, which is not a quantum system in the technical sense, but which operates according to the same fundamental principle of resource allocation. Your nervous system has known this all along. This is why you feel the friction. This is why the discomfort persists, even when you are not actively pursuing anything demanding. The friction is not the friction of effort. It is the friction of a system holding two incompatible states in tension simultaneously, burning energy not to move in either direction, but simply to maintain the illusion that both directions remain open. The exhaustion you feel is not from working too hard. It is from the metabolic cost of not choosing. Let's go deeper into what you are actually seeing. I want to show you something precise about the mechanics of comfort, because comfort has been misrepresented to you, and the misrepresentation is doing significant damage. Comfort is not the opposite of growth. Comfort is not laziness. Comfort is not weakness. Comfort is a biological state that your nervous system enters when it has assessed the environment as known, safe, and requiring minimal adaptive response. This is not a flaw in the system. This is the system working exactly as it was designed to work. In a genuinely safe environment, the optimal biological response is to conserve energy, to rest, to restore, to allow the system to consolidate what it has already learned. Comfort is your nervous system's gift to you in moments of genuine safety. But here is what happens when you bring the goal of transformation into a comfort-seeking nervous system. The nervous system does not distinguish between the feeling of safety and the strategy of safety. It does not evaluate whether your comfort is appropriate to your actual circumstances. It simply detects the presence or absence of threat signals and responds accordingly. And because your nervous system is extraordinarily good at what it does, because millions of years of evolution have refined it into a threat detection and comfort-seeking machine of remarkable precision, it will do everything in its power to maintain the comfort state once it has achieved it, including generating elaborate cognitive justifications for why the comfort state is actually the right strategic choice, including manufacturing fatigue when you approach the edge of comfort, including producing sudden urgent priorities that require your attention precisely when you are about to do the thing that would have pushed you past the comfortable boundary, including surrounding you with social signals, the worried faces of people who love you, the cautionary tales of people who tried and failed, the cultural narratives about balance and sustainability that confirm the comfort state as not just preferable, but responsible. Your nervous system is not your enemy, but it is not your ally in transformation. It is your ally in survival. And survival and transformation are not the same project. Watch what happens when you see this clearly. The moment you recognize that the resistance you feel toward the demanding choice is not wisdom, not discernment, not your higher self protecting you from a mistake, but is the biological comfort-seeking mechanism doing precisely what it was designed to do. The moment you see that, the resistance does not disappear, but it loses its authority. It becomes information rather than instruction. You can hear it, acknowledge it, and still choose. This is the observer state. This is what we are building toward. But first, let me show you something. Let me show you a story about observation and about the specific way that comfort disguises itself as wisdom so perfectly that most people never see through the disguise. There was a woman named Mira who came to a particular kind of clarity late in her life, though she would not have called it clarity at the time. She would have called it the worst year of her existence. Mira had spent 22 years building something she was proud of. A career that was respected, a life that was comfortable, a reputation that was solid. She had made sensible choices. She had taken the stable path. She had watched colleagues take risks, and she had watched some of them fail, and she had quietly, privately, with a small and private satisfaction, confirmed to herself that the stable path was the right one. But there was something Mira had not looked at, something she had been carefully not looking at for most of those 22 years. A thing she had noticed in the corner of her vision and then, with extraordinary efficiency, had looked away from before it could fully form in her awareness. The thing was this: she was not doing what she was here to do. Not in a vague spiritual sense, in a precise, observable sense. There was a specific kind of work that made Mira feel like the ceiling lifted off the world. Work that made time disappear. Work that made her feel like she was operating from a place so deep inside herself that she could not remember the path she had taken to get there. She had encountered this feeling enough times to know exactly what it was and exactly what produced it. And she had spent 22 years choosing every day in 1,000 small ways not to pursue it. Because pursuing it felt uncertain. Because pursuing it meant giving something up. Because pursuing it meant stepping off the stable path into the cold wind, and Mira's nervous system, which was, as nervous systems tend to be, extraordinarily good at its job, had generated, every single time she approached the edge, a perfectly reasonable explanation for why today was not the right day to step off. The explanation changed. Sometimes it was timing, sometimes it was resources, sometimes it was responsibility. To her family, to her colleagues, to the people who depended on her stability. Sometimes it was a very sophisticated argument about the value of patience, about how the right opportunity would present itself when she was truly ready, about how forcing it would damage the very thing she was trying to protect. The explanation was always different. The function was always the same. Keep her in the room with soft edges, keep the temperature stable, keep the ceiling low enough that she could not see what was above it. Then came the worst year, which arrived as worst years tend to, not as a single catastrophic event, but as a slow accumulation of small recognitions that she could no longer look away from. A conversation with someone younger who was doing the exact work Mira had been not doing, and doing it imperfectly, and doing it with a kind of aliveness that Mira had not felt in her own body in longer than she could remember. A morning when she sat at her desk and could not find a single reason to begin, not because she was depressed, because she was honest. Because for one unguarded moment she looked directly at the thing she had been not looking at, and she saw it with complete clarity. She was not becoming, she was maintaining. And maintaining, she understood in that moment, was not a neutral activity. Maintaining was a direction. It was the direction away from the thing she was here to do. Every day of maintaining was a day of moving away from it, not because she was standing still, but because the thing she was here to do was not a fixed location. It was a living process. It grew in the direction you moved toward it, and it receded in the direction you moved away from it. And she had been moving away from it efficiently and safely and with excellent reasons for 22 years. Mira sat with that observation. She did not rush past it. She did not immediately begin making plans or generating solutions or asking what the first step was. She simply watched what she had just seen. She let it be fully visible. And here is what she discovered, which is the thing that no one tells you about looking directly at the thing you have been avoiding. It did not feel the way she expected. She had expected devastation. She had expected grief or shame or the particular despair of someone who has wasted something irreplaceable. And those feelings were there, yes. They were present at the edges, real and legitimate. But at the center of the observation, at the place where she was simply seeing clearly, without interpretation or judgment, there was something else entirely. There was relief. There was the specific, physical, unmistakable relief of a system that has been holding two incompatible states in tension for 22 years and has finally been allowed to let one of them go. The friction stopped. Not because the choice was made yet, but because the observation was complete. She saw it, and what had been seen could not unsee itself. Mira did not quit her career the next morning. She did not make a dramatic gesture. She did not perform the transformation for an audience. She simply began, in private, to stop looking away. She began to look directly at what she wanted and at what it would cost, and at what she had been pretending the cost was in order to avoid paying the actual cost. She began to see the difference between the story she had been telling about her choices and the choices she had actually been making. And as she watched, as she applied the observer's gaze to her own life, with the same unflinching clarity she had spent 22 years applying to everything except this, reality began to reorganize. Not because she forced it, not because she manifested or attracted or created, because the clarity of her observation collapsed the probability field. Because the superposition of safety and power could not survive direct observation. Because the moment she truly looked, the wave function resolved. She chose, not once in a single dramatic moment, but again and again in 1,000 small moments, each of which was the same choice wearing a different face. The choice to look, the choice to see clearly, the choice to let the observation do what observations do when they are genuine, the choice to stop pretending there was a third option. And you have been both Mira and the one who watches Mira. You have been the one who looks away and the one who, in this moment, is choosing to look. The question is not whether you see yourself in this story. You already do. The question is what you do with the seeing. What was the story you had been telling yourself? The one that Mira's story just made visible. Drop it in the comments, not what you plan to do about it. Just the story itself, named plainly. Seeing it written down is its own form of observation, and it changes the field for everyone who reads it. Let's go deeper. Here is the layer underneath what you just saw. The choice between safety and power is not a choice between two external conditions. It is a choice between two states of consciousness, and this distinction matters enormously. Because if you understand it as a choice between external conditions, between a comfortable life and a difficult one, between security and risk, between what you have and what you want, you will approach it as a negotiation. You will try to find the arrangement of external circumstances that gives you the feeling of safety while producing the results of power, and you will fail. Not because the arrangement doesn't exist, but because the feeling of safety and the state of power are not produced by external arrangements. They are produced by the position of the observer. Watch this carefully. Safety, as a felt experience, not as an objective assessment of your circumstances, but as the actual somatic sensation of being safe, is produced by a specific relationship between the observer and the observed. Specifically, it is produced when the observer is larger than what is being observed. When you can hold the thing you are looking at within your field of awareness without being overwhelmed by it. When you are not inside the experience but watching it. When you are the witness and not the witnessed. This is why meditation practices that cultivate the observer state produce a felt sense of safety even in objectively difficult circumstances. Because the safety is not coming from the circumstances, it is coming from the position of the observer, from the recognition that you are the one who is watching, not the one who is being watched. From the expansion of awareness that happens when you stop being inside your experience and start being the one who is observing your experience. And here is where it becomes precise. Here is where the quantum mechanics of consciousness intersects with the phenomenology of power. Power. Genuine power, not the performance of power, not the accumulation of resources that you hope will produce the feeling of power, but the actual state of being a powerful observer in your own life. Power is also produced by the observer position. But it requires a specific quality of observation that comfort-seeking consciousness cannot access. Power requires the willingness to look at what is uncomfortable, to direct your attention at the thing your nervous system is signaling as threatening, to observe it fully without flinching, without looking away, without immediately generating an interpretation that makes it less threatening. To let the thing be exactly what it is under your gaze, without managing it, without softening it, without turning it into something your comfort-seeking system can tolerate. This is what most people cannot do, not because they are weak, because the comfort-seeking mechanism is so efficient, so automatic, so deeply wired into the architecture of the nervous system, that the redirection of attention away from threat happens before the conscious mind can intervene. You don't decide to look away. You look away before you have the chance to decide. The observer state is the practice of inserting a moment of conscious awareness between the threat signal and the automatic redirection. It is the practice of catching yourself in the act of looking away and choosing in that moment to look instead. And here is the paradox that the quantum field reveals. The moment you look at the threatening thing with full, unflinching, observer state awareness, the moment you stop managing your attention and simply let your awareness rest on the thing your nervous system has been treating as dangerous, the thing changes, not because you changed it, because observation itself changes what is observed, because the threatening quality of the thing was never in the thing. It was in the relationship between you and the thing. It was in the contraction of your awareness around it. It was in the shadow your avoidance cast. Direct observation dissolves the shadow. What remains is the actual thing, which is always more workable than the shadow suggested. This is not philosophy. This is measurable. This is the observer effect applied to the architecture of your own consciousness. Now I want to give you a practice, not a thought exercise, an observation. Pause here. If you can, close your eyes. If you cannot close your eyes, soften your gaze and let the visual field blur slightly. Take one breath that is slightly longer than your normal breath, and as you exhale, let your awareness expand slightly, not outward into the room, but inward toward the quality of your own attention. Now bring to mind the thing you have been not choosing, not the thing you want, not the outcome you are pursuing. The specific choice you have been avoiding making, the thing you have been treating as a question when you already know the answer. Let it be present in your awareness without immediately analyzing it or defending against it or generating reasons why it is more complicated than it appears. Just watch it. Watch the thing itself and watch your response to the thing. Notice the contraction. Notice where in your body the resistance lives. Notice the specific quality of the discomfort. Is it fear? Is it grief? Is it the particular heaviness of something you have been carrying for a long time without admitting you are carrying it? Now watch who is watching. There is the thing, and there is the response to the thing, and there is the one who is observing both. Find that one, the one who can see the resistance without being the resistance, the one who can feel the fear without being the fear, the one who is watching all of this with a clarity that the fear and the resistance do not have access to. That is the observer. That is you in your most powerful position. Stay there for a moment. Let the observer simply see, without fixing, without deciding, without immediately converting the observation into a plan. Just see. When you are ready, bring your attention back and notice what is different. Notice what the observation revealed that the avoidance was concealing. This is the practice. This is what we mean by the observer state. And what you just experienced, however briefly, however imperfectly, is the state from which the actual choice can be made. Not the choice made from fear, which is the choice to maintain. Not the choice made from desperate ambition, which is the choice to grasp, but the choice made from clear seeing, which is the only choice that collapses the wave function in the direction of power. Now let's go deeper into the specific thing that is running your reality right now. Because here's what I have been observing, and here's what the data reveals when you look at it without the comfortable interpretations. You have a story about why you haven't made the choice yet. The story is sophisticated. It has been refined over time through repeated telling until it has the smooth edges and internal coherence of something that has been polished by many hands. It sounds like wisdom. It sounds like discernment. It sounds like the kind of measured, mature perspective that distinguishes the person who has thought carefully about their life from the person who acts impulsively and suffers the consequences. The story sounds like this. I am not ready yet. The timing is not right. I need to build more foundation first. I need more resources, more preparation, more certainty about the direction. I am being strategic, not avoidant. I am playing the long game. I will make the choice when the conditions are better, when the risk is lower, when I have more to work with. Or the story sounds like this. I am already doing it. I am working toward it. I am making progress. It is just slow because real growth is slow, and I am being sustainable about it. And I am not going to burn myself out the way those other people did. Or the story sounds like this. I have responsibilities, people who depend on me. I cannot afford to take risks that would affect them. My situation is genuinely different from the people who made the dramatic choice because I have constraints they did not have. Every one of these stories is real. Every one of them contains genuine truth. The timing might actually be difficult. The foundation might actually need building. The responsibilities might actually be real. But look closer. The question is not whether the story is true. The question is what function the story is serving, because a story can be true and still be an avoidance mechanism. A story can contain real facts and still be constructed specifically to prevent you from having to see the one fact that the story is designed to obscure. Watch yourself telling the story. Watch the specific moment when the story arrives. Notice that it always arrives precisely when the actual choice is becoming visible. Notice that the story is not a neutral description of your circumstances. It is a response to the pressure of the choice. It is generated by the comfort-seeking mechanism in the moment when the discomfort of choosing becomes acute enough to require management. The story is not your assessment of your situation. The story is your nervous system's most sophisticated tool for maintaining the superposition, for keeping both states apparently available, for preserving the sensation of possibility without paying the cost of collapsing into a single definite reality. And here's what the observer sees when the observer looks at the story without being inside the story. The story is extraordinarily expensive. Not morally expensive, energetically expensive, metabolically expensive. The amount of cognitive and emotional resource that goes into maintaining the story, into keeping it coherent, into defending it against the moments of clarity that periodically break through, into generating new versions of it when the old version becomes too transparent, is enormous. Far more expensive than simply making the choice would be. The avoidance costs more than the thing being avoided. This is the central observation. This is the thing that changes everything when you see it clearly. The friction you feel, the low-grade, persistent, exhausting friction of a life that is not quite what you know it could be, is not the friction of difficulty. It is the friction of a system burning enormous resources to hold two incompatible states in tension. The moment you collapse the superposition, the moment you make the actual choice and let reality resolve into a single definite state, that energy becomes available, not for the choice you made, for everything, for the quality of your attention, the depth of your presence, the clarity of your seeing, for the work itself. This is what Mira discovered in that moment of clear seeing. The relief was not the relief of giving something up. It was the relief of stopping the metabolic cost of maintaining the fiction. The choice does not cost you energy. The avoidance of the choice costs you energy. The choice returns it. But look closer, because there is a layer underneath this that is more uncomfortable than what we have already seen, and it is the layer that actually matters. Here's what the observer sees when it looks at the choice between safety and power without the comfortable framings. The reason you've been treating this as a question, the reason you have been maintaining the superposition, is not primarily because you are afraid of failure. Failure is the story. Failure is the explanation the comfort-seeking mechanism offers when you ask it why you haven't chosen. The actual reason is more precise and more confronting. You're afraid that you will choose power and commit fully and pay the full cost. And you will discover that you are not who you thought you were. That the thing you have been protecting, the sense of yourself as someone who has potential, as someone who could, as someone who would if only the conditions were right. You're afraid that the attempt will reveal that the potential was the story, not the truth. That the superposition was not a state of genuine possibility, but a state of comfortable fiction. That what you have been calling readiness is actually just the elaborate maintenance of a self-concept that has never been tested. This is the fear underneath the fear. This is the thing the story about timing and resources and responsibility is actually protecting. Not your comfort, your identity. Sit with that for a moment. Don't rush past what you just saw, because this is where the quantum mechanics becomes most precise. Because identity, the stable, coherent, continuous sense of self that you carry through your life, is itself a collapsed wave function. It is itself an observation that has forced a superposition to resolve into a specific form. And like all collapsed wave functions, it has a specific relationship to the observation that produced it. The identity you are protecting, the identity of the person with potential, the person who could, the person who is being strategic and patient and sustainable. That identity was produced by a specific quality of observation. It was produced by the observation of yourself in the superposition state, in the state where both possibilities remain open, where you have not yet been tested, where the potential has not yet been required to become actual. The moment you collapse the superposition, the moment you make the actual choice and commit to it fully, the observation changes. And when the observation changes, the identity that was produced by the previous observation cannot survive. Not because you fail, but because the act of genuine commitment, of full metabolic alignment toward one direction, produces a different kind of self-knowledge. A knowledge that the superposition state was specifically designed to prevent. You will find out who you actually are, not who you might be, not who you could be under the right conditions, who you are right now. In the attempt, in the difficulty, in the gap between the cost and the result, when you are paying and seeing nothing. This is what the comfort-seeking mechanism is actually protecting you from. Not failure, self-knowledge, the specific, irreversible, permanently transforming self-knowledge that comes from having looked directly at yourself in the act of full commitment and seen what you are made of. And here is the observation that changes everything when you see it clearly. The self-knowledge that comes from the attempt, even the attempt that does not produce the outcome you sought, is more valuable than any outcome the attempt could produce. Because the outcome is external. It can be taken away, it can change, it can fail to satisfy in the way you imagined it would. But the self-knowledge is permanent. It is the kind of knowing that reorganizes your entire relationship to yourself. That makes the comfortable fiction of the superposition impossible to return to, not because you choose not to return to it, but because you can no longer not see what you have seen. The ones who made the trade, the ones who chose power over safety and paid the full cost, they do not primarily value what they achieved. They value what they discovered about themselves in the achieving. They value the specific, irreplaceable quality of knowing that they looked at the choice clearly and did not look away. This is what the comfortable path cannot give you. Not the outcome, the knowing. And the ones who chose comfort, not consciously, not with clear eyes, but by default, by maintaining the superposition until the field collapsed on its own into the safe direction, they do not primarily mourn what they failed to achieve. They mourn the not knowing, the permanent, unanswerable question of who they might have been if they had looked directly at the choice and made it. Both paths involve loss, but only one involves self-knowledge. Only one involves the permanent, irreversible expansion that comes from having been the observer of your own full commitment. Has there been a moment in your own life when seeing something clearly, really looking at it without flinching, dissolved its power over you? When the thing you had been avoiding turned out to be workable the moment you stopped looking away? Share that in the comments. That specific moment of clear seeing is exactly what someone else in this field needs to hear right now. Let's go deeper into what this means for you specifically, because I want to be precise about something that the language of power and safety can obscure if you are not watching carefully. When I say power, I am not talking about external power. I am not talking about achievement or status or the accumulation of outcomes that other people can observe and validate. I am not talking about the performance of transformation. I am talking about the specific internal state that is produced when a conscious system stops dividing its attention between two incompatible directions and aligns fully with a single one. The state that is produced when the observer stops trying to watch two things simultaneously and directs its full, undivided, completely present attention at the thing it has chosen to see. This state of complete observational alignment is what I mean by power. And it is available to you not because of what you achieve, but because of the quality of your choosing, because of the completeness of your commitment to the observation. A person who chooses a modest life fully, who looks at what they want, sees it clearly, chooses it without apology or self-deception, and commits to it with their whole system, that person is in the power state. Because they are not divided, because their observer is not trying to watch two incompatible things at once, because the wave function has collapsed and reality has resolved into a single definite form, and they are living in that form with clarity and presence. A person who pursues enormous external achievement while maintaining the internal superposition, while keeping one part of their attention on the exit routes, while hedging, while telling themselves the story about timing and strategy and sustainable excellence. That person is not in the power state, regardless of what they achieve, because the observer is divided, because the wave function has not fully collapsed, because the energy that should be available for the work is being consumed by the maintenance of the fiction. The power is not in the direction you choose. The power is in the completeness of the choosing. This is where the quantum principle becomes most personal, because it means that the question is not whether you choose safety or power in the conventional sense, whether you pursue the ambitious path or the comfortable one. The question is whether you choose fully and completely and with clear eyes whatever you choose, whether the observer collapses the wave function completely, or whether you maintain the superposition in the hope that you can have the feeling of both states without paying the cost of either. Most people, when they hear this, feel a particular kind of resistance. The resistance sounds like, but I genuinely don't know what I want. I genuinely haven't decided. I genuinely need more time to figure out the right direction. Watch that resistance carefully. Watch where it lives in your body. Watch the specific quality of the not knowing, because there is a real not knowing, a genuine uncertainty about direction that deserves time and discernment. And there is a performed not knowing, a strategic uncertainty that the comfort-seeking mechanism maintains specifically to prevent the choosing. The real not knowing has a quality of open curiosity, It is interested in figuring out the answer. It moves toward the information it needs. It takes the small steps that would reveal the direction. The performed not knowing has a quality of careful stasis. It is not curious. It is vigilant. It is watching for the moment when the not knowing might be challenged and preparing its defense. It does not take the small steps that would reveal the direction, because revealing the direction would require choosing, and choosing would require collapsing the superposition, and collapsing the superposition would require letting go of the comfortable fiction. Which one is yours? You already know. The observer in you already sees it. The question is whether you are willing to look. Here's another layer. Here is the thing underneath the thing underneath the thing. There is a specific moment in the process of genuine commitment, a moment that every person who has ever made a real choice has encountered, and that no one warns you about clearly enough, that I want to show you now. Because this moment is where most people turn back. And the reason they turn back is not because they lack courage. It is because they misread what the moment means. The moment comes after the choice is made, after the initial clarity, after the relief of the superposition collapsing, after the energy that was being consumed by the maintenance of the fiction becomes available, and you feel, briefly, the extraordinary sensation of a system fully aligned toward a single direction. Then the moment comes, and the moment feels like doubt. It feels like the recognition that the choice you made might have been wrong. It feels like the sudden vivid awareness of everything you gave up. It feels like the cold wind on bare skin that you were warned about, and it feels sharper and more relentless than you expected, and the part of your nervous system that is extraordinarily good at its job begins to generate, with impressive efficiency, a case for returning to the superposition, for reopening the question, for deciding that you did not have enough information, that the timing was not right, that the responsible thing is to reconsider. This moment feels like wisdom. It feels like the reasonable, mature recognition that you may have moved too fast, committed too completely, given up too much. It feels like the kind of honest self-assessment that distinguishes the thoughtful person from the impulsive one. It is not wisdom. It is the comfort-seeking mechanism's most powerful move. It is the last and most sophisticated attempt to restore the superposition. And it arrives precisely when it is most dangerous, which is after the choice has been made but before the results of the choice have appeared, in the gap, in the darkness between the cost and the reward, in the place where you are paying and seeing nothing. This is where most people abandon the path. Not because the path was wrong, because the moment of doubt arrives in the darkness, when there is no evidence to counter it with, and it is indistinguishable from genuine wisdom, and the comfort of the superposition is still close enough to return to. But look closer, because the observer state reveals something about this moment that the comfort-seeking mind cannot see. The doubt is not information about the choice. The doubt is information about the gap. It is the nervous system's response to the period of uncertainty between commitment and result. It is the biological signal that says this is unknown territory. This is not the mapped and comfortable space. This is the place where the outcome is not guaranteed. And that signal is accurate. The territory is unknown. The outcome is not guaranteed. The doubt is telling the truth about the uncertainty. But uncertainty is not a reason to return to the superposition. Uncertainty is the necessary condition of the collapsed state. Because the superposition felt certain, It felt like all possibilities were available, but it was actually the state of guaranteed stasis. The certainty of the superposition was the certainty of not moving. The uncertainty of the collapsed state is the uncertainty of actual movement through actual reality. You cannot have movement and certainty simultaneously. The physics does not permit it. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle, the principle that the more precisely you know a particle's position, the less precisely you can know its momentum, is not just a statement about subatomic particles. It is a statement about the fundamental structure of reality. Precision in one dimension requires uncertainty in another. The certainty of the superposition is the certainty of no momentum. The momentum of the collapsed state is the momentum of irreducible uncertainty. The doubt in the gap is not a signal to return. It is a signal that you are moving. Watch what happens when you see this. The doubt does not disappear, but it changes its meaning. It becomes evidence of commitment rather than evidence of error. It becomes the confirmation that the wave function has genuinely collapsed, that you are genuinely in motion, that the superposition has been genuinely released. Because you cannot feel the cold wind on bare skin if you are still in the room with soft edges. The discomfort is the proof of the choosing. Let me give you another practice, because what I am describing is not something that can be understood from the outside. It can only be recognized from inside the observer state. Pause here. Let your awareness settle. Take a breath that fills the lower part of your lungs first, then the upper. And as you exhale, let the breath carry out with it any interpretation you are currently holding about what you just heard. Let the meaning settle on its own without you managing it. Now bring to mind the moment of doubt, not a hypothetical doubt, your specific doubt. The specific version of the comfort-seeking mechanism's case for returning to the superposition that you have been carrying. The specific argument that has been most convincing, most persistent, most difficult to see through. Let it be fully present. Don't argue with it. Don't defend against it. Don't immediately generate counter-arguments. Simply observe it. Watch it the way you would watch a weather system, with interest, with attention, without being inside it. And as you watch it, notice its texture. Notice whether it has the quality of genuine information, the open, curious movement toward quality of real discernment, or whether it has the quality of vigilant stasis, whether it is moving toward clarity, or whether it is protecting against it. Notice whether the doubt is asking you to look more carefully, or whether it is asking you to stop looking. Because genuine discernment always asks you to look more carefully. It always moves toward more information, more clarity, more precise observation. It is never satisfied with less seeing. And the comfort-seeking mechanism always asks you to stop looking. It always moves toward less information, more comfortable interpretation, the reassurance that comes from not having to see what the clear seeing would reveal. Watch which one your doubt is doing. Stay with that observation for a moment. Let the observer simply see without immediately deciding what the seeing means. When you are ready, come back and notice what is different. This is the practice that the observer state makes possible. Not the elimination of doubt, the clear seeing of what the doubt is actually doing. And from that clear seeing, the choice, not forced, not performed, but genuinely made from the position of the observer, becomes available. Now let's go to the deeper layer, the layer that applies everything we have seen, to the specific shape of your life right now. Because here is what I observe when I look at the pattern of people who maintain the superposition for years, sometimes for decades. There is a specific cost that is not usually named because naming it requires looking at it, and looking at it is the very thing the superposition is designed to prevent. The cost is not what you fail to achieve, the cost is what you fail to become. And I want to be precise about the distinction because it is the most important observation in this entire transmission. What you achieve is external. It is the collapsed state of the probability field in the dimension of outcomes. It is the specific form that reality takes in response to your choices and your efforts and your quality of attention. It is real and it matters and it is worth pursuing. But what you become is internal. It is the collapsed state of the probability field in the dimension of consciousness itself. It is the specific form that the observer takes in response to what it has been willing to look at and what it has chosen to see and what it has had the courage to keep watching when the watching was most difficult. And here is the observation that changes everything. What you become determines what you can see, and what you can see determines what is possible in your reality, because the quantum field does not respond to your desires. It responds to your observation. It responds to the quality and the frequency and the completeness of your attention. And the quality of your attention is determined by who you have become through the choices you have made about what to look at and what to look away from. The observer creates the observed, not by force, by clarity. A person who has spent years maintaining the superposition, who has spent years looking away from the specific thing that required them to choose, has been training their observer. Not toward clarity, away from it. They have been practicing with extraordinary consistency the redirection of attention away from the thing that is most important to see. They have been developing through repetition the capacity to not look. And like all practice capacities, this one becomes more efficient over time, more automatic, more invisible, until looking directly at anything becomes difficult, until the observer, which was designed to see clearly, has been so thoroughly trained in the art of strategic not looking that it can no longer access the clarity that was its original nature. This is the deepest cost of the maintained superposition, not the outcomes you didn't achieve, the observer you didn't become, and this is why the choice between safety and power is not ultimately a choice about your circumstances, it is a choice about your consciousness, about the kind of observer you are training yourself to be, about whether the gaze you bring to your life is the gaze of someone who has practiced looking or the gaze of someone who has practiced looking away. The circumstances will change regardless. The outcomes will come and go. The achievements will arrive and be replaced by new challenges. But the observer, the quality of consciousness that you bring to whatever circumstances you find yourself in, that is the thing that is being shaped by every choice you make about what to look at. Every time you choose to look at the thing you have been avoiding, you train the observer toward clarity. Every time you choose to look away, you train it away from clarity. And the observer you are training right now, in this moment, with this choice, that observer is the one who will meet every future moment. That observer is the one who will determine what is possible in every future circumstance. The choice between safety and power is the choice about who the observer becomes. Now watch what happens when you see this clearly, because here is the paradox that the quantum field reveals. And it is the paradox that resolves the apparent opposition between safety and power in a way that the comfort-seeking mind cannot access. The observer who has trained toward clarity, who has practiced looking at what is uncomfortable, who has developed the capacity to see without flinching, who has chosen again and again to collapse the superposition rather than maintain it, that observer experiences a quality of safety that the comfort-seeking mind has never accessed. Because the safety is not coming from the external circumstances, it is coming from the observer's relationship to whatever circumstances arise. It is coming from the recognition that the observer can look at anything. That nothing that arises in the field of experience is too much to be seen. That the clarity of the gaze is sufficient for whatever the gaze encounters. This is the safety that is only available on the other side of the choice, not the safety of the soft-edged room, which is always dependent on the room remaining soft-edged, but the safety of an observer who knows that it can look at anything because it has practiced looking at the things it was most afraid to see. The power and the safety are not opposites. They are the same state accessed through the same practice produced by the same quality of consciousness. The observer who has trained toward clarity has both, because the clarity itself is both. But you cannot access this from inside the superposition. You cannot access this while maintaining the fiction that both states are simultaneously available without the choosing. The clarity, the observer's clarity that produces both genuine safety and genuine power, is only available after the wave function has collapsed, after the choice has been made, after the observation has been completed. This is the thing that cannot be shortcut. This is the thing that no optimization strategy or morning routine or balanced, sustainable approach can produce. This is the thing that requires the actual choice. Let's go deeper into what choosing looks like. Because I want to be precise about this, because the comfort-seeking mechanism has a very sophisticated version of choosing that looks exactly like the real thing from the outside and feels almost exactly like it from the inside, but is not it. The performed choice, the choice that the comfort-seeking mechanism generates when the pressure to choose becomes acute, has several distinguishing characteristics. It is dramatic. It involves a clear narrative of transformation. It is announced, often publicly, to people whose opinions matter. It generates a brief, intense sensation of clarity and relief, which is the sensation of the superposition appearing to collapse. But the wave function has not actually collapsed, because the performed choice is not made from the observer state. It is made from the reactive state, from the pressure of the moment, from the discomfort of being seen to not choose, from the desire to have the feeling of having chosen, without paying the cost of the actual choosing. And the performed choice, because it is not made from the observer state, does not survive the moment of doubt. When the cold wind arrives, when the gap between cost and result opens up, when the doubt presents its case for returning to the superposition, the performed choice has no foundation, because it was not made from clarity, it was made from pressure. And pressure is temporary, but the gap is long. The real choice, the choice that collapses the wave function completely, that survives the moment of doubt, that produces the genuine relief of the superposition being released. The real choice is quiet. It is not dramatic. It is not announced. It is made in private, in the observer state of from from a place of complete clarity about what is being chosen and what is being given up and what the cost will be. The real choice does not generate excitement, it generates steadiness, the specific, grounded, unperformable steadiness of a system that has fully aligned toward a single direction and is no longer burning energy on the maintenance of the fiction. You will know the real choice when you make it, because it will not feel like triumph, it will feel like relief. The relief of a long-held tension finally releasing. The relief of the observer finally being allowed to see clearly, without the management, without the story, without the carefully maintained uncertainty. And then the work begins, not the dramatic work of the performed transformation. The quiet, unglamorous, repetitive work of a consciousness that has chosen its direction and is now simply moving in it. One observation at a time, one moment of not looking away at a time, one small choosing again and again, each of which is the same choice wearing a different face. This is what the power state actually looks like from the inside. Not the feeling of power, the practice of clarity. Here's what I want you to do right now, not as a thought exercise, as an observation. I want you to look at one specific thing that you have been not choosing. Not the big abstract choice, the specific, concrete, particular thing that is the current face of the choice between safety and power in your life. The specific thing you have been treating as a question when you already know the answer. The specific thing that the story about timing and resources and responsibility has been protecting you from having to look at directly. Let it be present. Don't manage it. Don't immediately generate a plan. Don't convert the observation into action before you have completed the seeing. Just let it be fully visible in your awareness. And now observe with complete honesty the following. What is the specific cost of making this choice? Not the abstract cost, the actual, concrete, particular thing you would have to give up. The specific comfort that would have to be released. The specific exit route that would have to be closed. The specific version of yourself that would have to be let go of. See it clearly. Don't soften it. Don't tell yourself it won't be as hard as it looks. Let the cost be exactly what it is. And then observe this. What is the specific cost of not making this choice? Not the abstract cost. The actual, concrete, particular thing that maintaining the superposition is costing you right now, in this moment, in the quality of your attention and the depth of your presence and the clarity of your seeing. The specific energy being consumed by the maintenance of the fiction. The specific version of yourself that is not becoming, because the observer has been practicing not looking instead of looking. See both costs clearly. Let them be equally visible. Don't let the comfort-seeking mechanism make one cost more vivid than the other. Let the observer see both with the same unflinching clarity, and now notice what happens in the space between those two observations. Notice whether the choice seen from this position still feels like a question. Stay with that. The observer is working. Let it work. Now let's go to the place where this becomes about more than just you. Because here is what I observe when I look at the pattern of consciousness in this particular moment in history. We are living in a time of extraordinary superposition maintenance, a time when the tools for managing the appearance of choosing, while actually maintaining the fiction of all possibilities, have become so sophisticated, so pervasive, so culturally normalized, that the performed choice has almost entirely replaced the real one in the public discourse about transformation and growth and becoming. The content you consume about your potential, the frameworks you apply to your development, the communities you join around the idea of becoming, the language you use to describe your journey, all of it is extraordinarily good at producing the sensation of movement while maintaining the superposition. All of it is extraordinarily good at making the performed choice feel like the real one. All of it is extraordinarily good at giving you the feeling of the observer state without requiring you to actually occupy it. This is not an accident. The system that produces this content, the economy of transformation, the market for self-improvement, is not designed to collapse your wave function. It is designed to keep you in the superposition. Because a person in the superposition is a consumer, a person who has genuinely collapsed the wave function, who has made the real choice and is doing the quiet, unglamorous work of a consciousness fully aligned toward a single direction, that person does not need the content. That person is busy with the work. The market for transformation is sustained by people who have not yet transformed. And the most efficient way to sustain it is to provide the sensation of transformation without the substance of it. To give you the feeling of the observer state without the practice of it. To give you the language of clear seeing without the willingness to look. Watch yourself consuming transformation content. Watch what happens in your nervous system when you watch a video about becoming your best self, or when you read a book about the habits of highly effective people, or when you listen to a podcast about the mindset of successful people. Notice the specific quality of the sensation. Notice whether it has the quality of genuine clarity, the open, curious movement toward quality of real seeing, or whether it has the quality of comfortable stimulation. The pleasant sensation of being adjacent to transformation without the discomfort of actually doing it. I'm not exempt from this observation. This transmission itself can be consumed in the superposition state. You can watch this, feel the sensation of clarity, feel the resonance of recognition, feel the particular pleasure of a truth being named precisely, and then close the window and return to the maintenance of the fiction without anything having actually changed. The observer state is not produced by consuming content about the observer state. It is produced by the practice of observation itself, by the specific, repeated, unglamorous act of directing your attention at the thing you have been avoiding and keeping it there long enough for the observation to complete. The content can point at the practice, but the content is not the practice, and the distinction matters more than anything else I have said in this transmission. So here is what I'm asking you to do, not with me, not in the context of this video, but when this is over, when you have returned to the ordinary texture of your day, when the sensation of clarity that comes from watching something that names things precisely has faded, and the familiar patterns of your life have reasserted themselves. In that moment, the moment when the superposition reasserts itself, when the story about timing and resources and responsibility returns, when the comfort-seeking mechanism begins its efficient work of restoring the familiar, in that moment, I am asking you to remember the observer, not the concept of the observer, not the language of quantum mechanics, not the parable of Mira or the physics of wave function collapse. I am asking you to remember the practice, the specific, direct, unglamorous practice of looking at the thing you have been not looking at and keeping your gaze there long enough for the observation to complete. Because the observer is not a concept you understand. It is a capacity you develop, And it is developed the same way every capacity is developed, through repetition, through the specific repeated act of choosing to look. When the comfort-seeking mechanism is signaling that looking is dangerous, every time you look, you strengthen the observer. Every time you look away, you weaken it. This is not metaphor. This is the actual architecture of consciousness, shaped by the actual choices you make about where to direct your attention. The choice between safety and power is made in every moment, not once, not in a single dramatic decision, but in every moment when the observer is present and the choice to look or look away is available. This is both the most demanding truth and the most liberating one, because it means at the moment you chose to look, the moment you began watching this, the moment you let the recognition arise, the moment you sat with the observation instead of immediately generating a defense against it, that moment was the choice. That moment was the wave function collapsing. That moment was the beginning of the power state, not the completion of it, the beginning, the first of the 1,000 small choices that constitute the real choosing. And the fact that you are still here, the fact that you have been watching, that you have been willing to let the observation complete, that you have not looked away when the looking became uncomfortable, that is not a small thing. That is the practice. That is the observer state, not as a concept, but as an actual quality of consciousness that you are exercising right now in this moment by choosing to see clearly what you have been avoiding seeing. The fact that you are still here means you are willing to look. That is rare. That is the beginning of everything. Let me show you one more thing. Let me show you what is on the other side of the real choice. Not the outcome, not the achievement, the specific quality of consciousness that becomes available when the observer has been trained toward clarity through the practice of looking at what is most difficult to see. There is a man named Kyle who I want you to watch for a moment. Not because his story is extraordinary, because it is ordinary in exactly the way that the truth about transformation is always ordinary, which is to say, it is unglamorous and quiet and nothing like the dramatic narrative that the performed transformation promises. Kyle spent the first 40 years of his life in a particular kind of superposition. He was gifted with a specific capacity, a way of seeing connections between things that others missed, a way of holding complexity without needing to resolve it prematurely, a way of staying present with uncertainty long enough for the deeper pattern to emerge. He knew he had this capacity. He had known since he was young, and he had spent 40 years finding very sophisticated ways to not use it, not because he was lazy, because using it fully would have required him to be the person who used it fully. And being the person who used it fully would have meant giving up the person who might someday, under the right conditions, use it fully. The potential, the superposition, the comfortable fiction of unrealized capacity. Kyle had a very good life in the superposition. He was successful in the conventional sense. He was respected, he was comfortable. He had the story about timing and resources and the right moment, and the story was convincing enough that he had told it to himself for 40 years without it becoming transparent. Then something happened that is not important in its specifics. Because the specific event is never what matters. It is always just the thing that makes the not looking temporarily impossible. And Kyle found himself in the observer state for long enough to see what he had been not seeing. He saw the capacity fully, not as potential, as actual, as the specific thing that was present in him right now, not as a future possibility, but as a current reality that he had been systematically not using for 40 years. And he saw with equal clarity the cost, not the future cost of not using it. The current, daily, ongoing cost that the maintenance of the superposition was extracting from him in the quality of his attention and the depth of his presence and the aliveness of his engagement with his own life. He saw both clearly, and he made the choice. Quietly, without drama, without announcement, in the privacy of his own observer state. And then the ordinary, unglamorous work began. What Kyle discovered, and this is the thing I want you to watch carefully, is that the work itself was not what he had imagined. He had imagined that using the capacity fully would feel like power, like the dramatic, vivid, triumphant sensation that the performed transformation promises. He had imagined that commitment would feel like certainty, like momentum, like the feeling of finally moving in the right direction after years of standing still. It did not feel like that. It felt like the cold wind on bare skin. It felt like the gap between cost and result, long and dark and offering no immediate evidence that the choice had been right. It felt like the doubt arriving precisely on schedule with its sophisticated case for returning to the superposition. And Kyle, who had spent 40 years training the observer toward clarity, who had, even in the superposition, been practicing the quality of seeing that would eventually make the real choice possible. Kyle recognized the doubt for what it was, not wisdom, not discernment. The comfort-seeking mechanism's last and most sophisticated move. He watched it. He let it be fully present in his awareness. He did not argue with it or defend against it or immediately generate counter-arguments. He simply observed it with the same quality of attention he was learning to bring to everything. And in the observing, the doubt revealed its nature. It was not asking him to look more carefully. It was asking him to stop looking. And Kyle, who had chosen to look, kept looking. The results came. Not on the timeline he had imagined, not in the form he had expected, not with the dramatic clarity of a narrative that had a satisfying arc. They came the way all real results come, gradually, then suddenly, in a form that was both less and more than what he had been pursuing. Less in the external dimension, more in the internal one. More in the quality of his consciousness, in the depth of his presence, in the specific, irreplaceable, permanent self-knowledge that comes from having been the observer of your own full commitment. Kyle does not primarily value what he achieved. He values what he discovered about himself in the achieving. He values the specific quality of knowing that he looked at the choice clearly and did not look away. And here is what he told me in the language of someone who has been on the other side of the real choice and is reporting back with the precision of a reliable observer. The safety is better, not the safety of the soft-edged room. The safety of an observer who knows it can look at anything. The safety that is not dependent on the circumstances remaining comfortable. The safety that is available in the cold wind, in the gap, in the darkness between cost and result. The safety of clarity. You were never meant to look away. This is what I want you to take from this transmission, not the concept, not the framework, not the language of quantum mechanics or the parable of Mira or the story of Kyle. This specific, simple, actionable recognition. You were never meant to look away. The capacity for clear seeing, the observer state, the quality of consciousness that can look at what is most difficult to see without flinching. That capacity is not something you need to develop from scratch. It is your original nature. It is what you were before the comfort-seeking mechanism learned to redirect your attention. It is what you still are, underneath the years of practice, not looking. The practice is not the development of something new. It is the recovery of something original. The return to the observer that you were before you learned that looking at certain things was dangerous. Before the nervous system, doing its job with extraordinary efficiency, trained you to redirect your gaze at the precise moment when the clear seeing would have been most valuable. The practice is the return, and the return begins with a single observation, with the specific, unglamorous, quietly revolutionary act of looking at the thing you have been not looking at and keeping your gaze there long enough for the observation to complete. So here's what I'm asking you to do. Right now, before this transmission ends, before you return to the familiar patterns of your day, before the superposition reasserts itself and the story about timing and resources and responsibility returns. Look at the thing, the specific thing, the one you already know, the one that the entire architecture of your comfort seeking has been organized around not seeing. Let it be fully visible. Don't manage it. Don't immediately convert it into a plan or a framework or a set of actionable steps. Just let the observer see it. And then let the observer see the choice. Not the abstract choice between safety and power, the specific, concrete, particular choice that is the current face of that opposition in your life. The specific thing you have been treating as a question when you already know the answer. Let the observer see both costs clearly. The cost of choosing, the cost of not choosing. Let them be equally visible, equally real, equally present in your awareness. And then let the observer be the observer. Let the clarity be the clarity. Let the seeing do what seeing does when it is complete and unflinching and genuinely allowed to be what it is. The choice will make itself. Not because you forced it, because clarity is the only force that transforms without resistance. Because the observer, in the full power of its seeing, does not need to decide, it simply sees. And what it sees, clearly and completely, collapses into the only form that genuine observation can produce. The truth. And what has been truly seen cannot be unseen now. Before you go, I want to speak directly to the part of you that is already preparing the defense. The part that is already generating the sophisticated version of the story about why this transmission, while resonant and interesting, does not quite apply to your specific situation. The part that is already finding the ways in which your circumstances are genuinely different, your constraints are genuinely real, your timing is genuinely not right in a way that is distinct from the strategic not rightness that the comfort-seeking mechanism manufactures. I see you, the observer sees you, and I am not going to argue with you, because argument is not what is needed here, and because the comfort-seeking mechanism is far better at argument than any transmission can be. Instead, I'm going to ask you one question, and I am going to ask you to let the observer answer it, not the mind, not the story, not the sophisticated framework of your self-understanding. The observer. The question is this: if you knew with absolute certainty that you would not fail, If the outcome were guaranteed, if the cost were exactly what you imagine it to be and you would pay it fully and the result would come, would you still be treating this as a question? Watch what happens in your body when you hear that. Watch the specific quality of the response. Notice whether the hesitation that remains is about the outcome or about something else. Notice whether what you are protecting is the possibility of success or the comfortable fiction of unrealized potential. Notice whether the question, seen from this angle, still feels like a question. Stay with that. The observer is working. Let it work. And when you are ready, not when you feel ready, because the feeling of readiness is the superposition's most comfortable lie, but when the observer has seen clearly enough that the seeing itself becomes the choosing, when you are ready, take one step. Not the dramatic step, not the step that announces the transformation, the quiet step. The specific, concrete, unglamorous step that is the first small choosing in the direction of the collapsed state. The first act of the observer who has decided to look instead of look away. One step, then the next, then the next. Each one the same choice wearing a different face. Each one the observer practicing clarity. Each one the wave function collapsing again and again into the only form that genuine observation can produce. This is the practice, this is the power, this is the safety that is available on the other side of the real choice. You were never meant to look away, and now you see. And what has been seen cannot be unseen. If you are in the comments right now, I want you to do one thing, not a declaration of intention, not a statement of what you plan to do, an observation. Drop one word, just one, that describes what you saw when you looked, the specific thing the observer found when you stopped managing your attention and let it rest on what has been waiting to be seen. One word, the most honest one you have. Because the comments are not a performance space, they are a field of observers. And when one person drops their honest observation into that field, it changes the quality of seeing for everyone who encounters it. Your clarity is not just for you. It is a contribution to the collective field. It is the quantum observer effect operating at the scale of a community of people who have chosen to look. Drop the word. Let it be real. And if this transmission gave you something, if the seeing it produced was genuine, if the observer state it pointed at was one you recognized, if the clarity it offered was the kind that persists after the screen goes dark, then share it with someone who has been avoiding a look they know they need to take. Because when you share what you have seen with someone who is standing at the edge of their own not looking, you give them something the comfort-seeking mechanism cannot manufacture. Permission. Your willingness to have looked becomes evidence that looking is survivable. That the thing on the other side of the seeing is workable. That the observer is strong enough to hold it. This is the field of collective observation. One person's clarity lowering the cost of seeing for everyone in their orbit. The observer who sees clearly and shares what they see is not performing transformation. They are participating in it. They are contributing their clarity to the field. They are doing the quantum work of the collective observer, whose seeing amplifies the seeing of everyone in the field. This is why we are here. This is what Quantum Watcher is. Not a channel about transformation. A field of observers, a community of people who have chosen to look at what others look away from and who support each other in the practice of clear seeing. Stay in the field, keep looking. The observer is the most powerful position in the universe. Not because it controls, because it sees clearly. And you were never meant to look away. Here's the integration principle that I want you to carry from this transmission into the texture of your ordinary day. It is simple. It is not dramatic. It is the kind of thing that is easy to hear and difficult to practice, which is exactly the kind of thing that matters. Every time you notice the comfort-seeking mechanism redirecting your attention, every time you catch yourself looking away from the thing that needs to be seen, pause. Just pause. One breath. One moment of the observer being present before the automatic redirection completes. In that pause, ask the observer's question, what am I not looking at right now? Not as a judgment, not as a demand for immediate action, as a genuine inquiry, as the observer, curious about what is present in the field of experience that the comfort-seeking mechanism is treating as too dangerous to see. And then look. Even briefly, even imperfectly, even if the looking produces discomfort, and the discomfort produces the immediate desire to look away again. Look for one moment longer than feels comfortable. Let the observation be 1 degree more complete than the comfort-seeking mechanism would prefer. That 1 degree, that one moment of looking longer than feels comfortable. That is the practice. That is where the observer is trained. That is where the capacity for clear seeing is developed. One small choosing at a time in the ordinary moments of an ordinary day. Not in the dramatic moments, not in the transformative retreats or the peak experiences or the moments of crisis when the not looking becomes temporarily impossible. In the ordinary moments, in the 1,000 small moments each day when the choice between looking and looking away is available, and the comfort-seeking mechanism makes its efficient recommendation and the observer, trained or untrained, practiced or atrophied, makes its choice. Every choice to look trains the observer toward clarity. Every choice to look away trains it away from clarity. The observer you are becoming is the sum of those choices. The reality you are living in is the collapsed state of the probability field that your observer has been producing through the quality and completeness of its attention. What you watch, you change. What you avoid watching controls you. This is not belief. This is quantum mechanics. And you who are still here, you who've been willing to look, you who have let the observation complete without immediately converting it into a comfortable interpretation, you are already in the practice. You are already the observer. You have been watching longer than you realize. Now watch what happens next. The observer is the most powerful position in the universe. Not because it controls, because it sees clearly. And you were never meant to look away. If what moved in you during this transmission was the recognition that something has already shifted, that the field has already noticed a change in how you are showing up, watch. The quantum field noticed you've changed. It will show you precisely what happens in the field when the observer begins to collapse the superposition and what that change makes possible that was not possible before.